Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network. This is our special Saturday edition called Step Up Your Game with Dan. I'm your host, Dan Handford, and I'll be discussing topics to help you make better decisions to increase your productivity, increase your sales, and improve your overall marketing. Visit toughdecisions.net to sign up for our free weekly entrepreneur email. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HandfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HandfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HandfordCapital.com. On today's episode of Step Up Your Game with Dan, we're going to be talking about how selling is too hard. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. So let me start it off by talking to you about what happened to me recently. I was at a seminar recently, and the person that was speaking at the seminar was talking about how lately selling is getting harder and harder and harder. And he was almost to the point of discouraging the audience that selling is not what you should be doing. And that selling, because it's going to get harder, it is hard, and it's harder than it ever has been, that we should try to get away from selling. And I thought it was kind of interesting because it kind of took me back, and I was like, that is totally wrong. Selling has always been hard. Selling is not an easy thing, but it can be easy as long as you know what is ahead. And so I want to go over a few things that came to my mind that has to do with selling that will hopefully help you be able to sell and sell more and not always think about it being too hard. Because I like sales. I like being sold too. And I know some of you who are listening are the same way. You like to sell, but you also like being sold too. And so first off, let's talk about how to sell without competition. Some people might say, well, it's getting harder for me to sell my product or service or widget or whatever the case is, and it's probably because I have too much competition. But you have to ask yourself, if you have a lot of competition, then how can you set yourself apart? How can you do things to make sure that you are different than your competition? So you have to put some things into place to make sure that you have that USP, that unique selling proposition that does set you apart. And once you have that unique selling proposition in place, then as you start to sell things to your customers or your investors or your donors, then you can start to point out how you are different. And making yourself different will allow you to be able to make those points with your particular prospect. But I want to talk to you about two different stories, really three. So let's start off by talking about how to get yourself out of the commodity business. So I'm a chiropractor by trade. I don't practice chiropractic anymore because I'm more of an entrepreneur and I have multiple businesses. And for those of you who don't know my background and my story, I encourage you to go to our website, toughdecisions.net, and look up episode 0, where my wife and I get on the podcast and talk a little bit about us, how we met, and our background story. So one of the things that I did when I first started into chiropractic is I did a treatment that was called spinal decompression, non-surgical spinal decompression. And it was for people who have bulging, herniated, and degenerative discs, so these really serious disc problems and lower back issues, and almost to the point of them having to look to surgery for help and for relief. And so there's a lot of chiropractors out there that were doing this particular treatment called non-surgical spinal decompression. And so I wanted to be able to stand out, and I wanted to be different than my competition. And so one of the things that I did is I created my own method, and one of the pieces of the method was the non-surgical spinal decompression. And that method was called the NDS method, and this is for no disc surgery. And it's a term or a name that I coined, and I even have a trademark on that NDS method, and it helped me be able to stand out from my competition. And I was the number one person, number one chiropractor in my town that was doing non-surgical spinal decompression, but nobody knew that that's what I was doing as far as my competition. I was doing the NDS method, and the NDS method was a treatment that used non-surgical spinal decompression, but I was able to command a premium for that procedure and that service because it was mine, it was exclusive, and that it couldn't be shopped. There was nothing else that they could do. So, for example, if I threw an advertisement on the newspaper or on the radio or on a billboard about the NDS method, people might Google it or do some research on it, but guess what they would find? They would find me and my website and everything about me and all the good positive patient testimonials that I was able to get from my patients, and talks about how good the NDS method was. Nobody else in my town had the NDS method and could use the NDS method. And so when they started to research it, the only person they could find was me. And so that's one way you can get out of the commodity business. And so the second thing along those same lines is I have a friend of mine in Florida who does a treatment for knee pain, which is a very standardized treatment that a lot of orthopedic surgeons and orthopedic offices use, called viscosupplementation. It's a little jelly-like substance that we call them the gel shots. That it's called viscosupplementation. It's injected right into the intra-articular part of the joint and the knee, and it helps to give more cushion back to the knee joint, some more fluid, some more hydration. And it's something that just about any orthopedic office can do and does, and even some primary care offices do. But being able to stand out from the crowd, this physician was able to, the one that's my friend, was able to come up with his own type of method, and he called it the Heil Region CT. Now, Heil meaning hyalgin, because that's the type of substance it is, and regenerative because he also comprised it with some stem cell treatment, and then CT was cellular tissue. So Heil Region CT. And so now anybody, when he's advertising for patients to do this Heil Region CT treatment, he comes up. There's nobody else who is doing this particular service. So I want you to take a moment and just kind of think about what you are currently doing right now that you could possibly coin a particular treatment or method or service or product or something that can make you, instead of just being a commodity, make you special and make you different and make you stand out. And so that when you advertise for it, no one can research it except for finding you. And so you're not just, doing an advertisement for some standardized product. You're doing it for your particular product and your particular service. To give you an example of what we're doing in our offices coming up is our offices are called Vitality Medical Centers, and we're based in South Carolina. We have 5 medical offices here. So like I said earlier, I'm a chiropractor, but I don't do chiropractic anymore. We have 5 specialty medical clinics that do non-surgical orthopedic treatment. So we have some nurse practitioners and medical doctors, and we have a little under 50 employees that work for us there. But one of the things that we're getting ready to add is a cosmetic treatments to our office, like Botox and Juvederm and some PRP for the hair and various treatments like that. PRP facials. Some of you may have heard of those before, but it's a regenerative cosmetic practice. But there's a lot of people who are doing, for example, Botox. Everybody tries to compete on price. They try to be the lowest price Botox treatment center. Well, for people who have the ability to spend money on things like this, a lot of times they're not just looking for the cheapest thing. I wouldn't suggest looking for the cheapest Botox doctor just so you can get the Botox. I would actually rather go to somebody who is really, really good. And so one of the things that we're going to do, because we have a board-certified physician that's doing these treatments in our offices, we are going to be the most expensive Botox treatment center. And so we're going to be special. We're going to be different. We're going to be the most expensive. And when you start to advertise yourself in a particular space as being the most expensive, what do people inherently think? Yeah, you're going to get rid of people who are just trying to get the best price and the cheapest price, but a lot of times those are more high maintenance people anyway. And so you're going to get somebody who is a little bit higher clientele, a little bit higher end, and they don't mind spending the money on things, and they're going to be less price sensitive. And so that's another way to try to, make yourself special and make yourself different. And one last example I wanted to give here was Topgolf. A lot of you have heard of Topgolf, and if you haven't, Topgolf will most likely be coming to a town near you. They are opening and expanding all across the country and all across the world, and it's basically an indoor golf range, but it's almost like bowling, but it's golf. And so if you haven't ever heard of Topgolf before, I would encourage you to look it up. But I've recently been doing some networking events at Topgolf, and it is very challenging to get them to negotiate with you. And the reason why is because there is nothing like it anywhere. You can't do anything like Topgolf anywhere right now. So they have a monopoly on this space, and it's in very high demand, and they know it. And so they can command a price and stick it there and say, we're not going to come off that price because we know that we're going to get it. And so remember, try to be able to sell without competition, because selling is or can be very hard if you don't know what you're doing. So the next thing I wanted to go over is how selling is a marathon and not a sprint. Selling's a process, and many times a very long process. And just keep in mind that the larger the deal, the longer it will take during this process and the longer that marathon will be. And so, for example, right now I do real estate investing through my company called handfordcapital.com, and we seek investments from accredited investors, and they're usually putting in at least $100,000 or more, and sometimes less than that, just depends on the deal. But typically the minimum investment is $50,000, but the average investment is over $100,000. Well, I'm not just going to, go meet somebody one day and then all of a sudden the next day they're going to write me a check or wire me money for a deal. They want to know me. They want to like me. They want to trust me. They want to see my proven track record that we have of providing returns and providing results for our investors. And so the larger the deal, the longer it's going to take for that sales process. And you have to be in it for the long run. Selling is not a sprint. One of the things I also want to talk about is how you must be getting enough no's in order to be in that top sales bracket. If you're not getting enough no's, and that means you're not talking to enough people. You got to be talking to people. You got to get out there. You got to be networking with people to be able to get the yeses. The more and more no's that you get, it means that it's the closer you are getting to a yes. Okay? So selling is a relationship business. You have to build relationships, but the biggest thing with building relationships in sales is you don't want to get too personal too fast. Otherwise, you risk looking too eager, okay? And so you must be natural. It must be authentic. So get out there, meet new people, start selling, change your product or service from being a commodity and get it into something special and different. And the last thing I'll tell you to help you with your sales process is you must be role-playing. Some people would say, oh, you don't want to practice your sales. Yes, you do. You want to practice your sales. You want to practice your role-playing. You want to practice any objections that might be coming your way. One of the things that we do in our medical practices is we have a center that answers all of the new patient calls from any of the marketing that we do, and we call it our practice support center. And so that we have representatives on the phone during business hours that are ready and available at all times to answer the phones, and their dedicated job is to get that patient in and scheduled for a new patient appointment. And so those are our quote-unquote salespeople, if you will. They're not really selling anything per se, but their responsibility is to close that patient into scheduling an appointment. And so our staff role plays every single morning for at least 20 to 30 minutes a day, every day. And you might think it's a little bit crazy to do that, but the more you role play like that, the better you're going to get, the more confident you're going to sound with your prospect. So I would suggest that you always should be role playing. So role play, role play, role play. So let me just recap one last time here. You want to make sure that you try to sell without competition. One strategy we talked about with this is trying to get out of the commodity business and to get your service special and different and separate. And remembering that selling is a marathon, not a sprint. And then finally selling is a relationship business. And then being sure, lastly, that you role play, role play, role play. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until next time, talk to you later. Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.